What's up, guys? I'm Jimmy, and you're back at the Surplus Shooter. Today, I want to discuss with you a little bit about the Japanese civilian defense forces used in World War II, along with the Japanese Keibodan, which was part of those civilian defense forces. They were actually a civilian police force used in the Dutch East Indies. And more specifically, I wanted to go over this Japanese civilian defense force helmet, which I acquired a few months back, along with the Keibodan badge that I acquired separately because the helmet was missing its badge. I acquired this from a woman whose father brought it back from World War II. He was in the Navy. She's not even sure what islands he was on. They never really talked about what he experienced or why he brought this back, but she wishes they really would have. So I let that kind of be a lesson. If you have any ancestors that are getting older, make sure you pick their brains, because once that encyclopedia is gone, it's gone. So let's take a closer look at the helmet. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the civilian defense forces and the Keibodan. These weren't really a fighting force, even though I have heard some of them were stationed on Iwo Jima. You could see them more as a Japanese homeland humanitarian effort. They would do things such as fire rescue, medical, food preparation, manning shelters, and things like that, along with policing the civilian population. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the helmet and what's going on inside. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Japanese Civilian Defense Force helmet itself and the Keibodan badge, in which I purchased separately. The seller of this helmet believed that it was missing a rivet which holds the interior liner on the inside. It was not missing a rivet. It was missing its badge. There's no telling what badge was originally on it. It could have been a fire rescue badge, medical badge, could have been a police badge, or a Keibodan badge. I went ahead and got a Keibodan badge for it. The Keibodan were a civilian police force in the Dutch East Indies, which the Dutch East Indies would be surrendered to the Japanese in 1942. And the Keibodan would be in charge of policing the civilians in the area. Now, these helmets come in many different varieties. Unlike the Imperial Army and Navy helmets only have so many variations, these have many variations because anybody who could shape a piece of steel into something that resembled a helmet was doing so. This one has an okay thickness, but it's still quite thin. You couldn't hope for this thing to stop more than maybe a rock from hurting you. Now, this helmet bears some damage on the top, significant denting, and what looks like a couple repeated strikes. These two right here kind of look like it was hit by the same thing twice. Now, to cause that sort of damage still, even though the steel is fairly thin, would take a fair amount of force. So who knows if this ended the user or a building collapsed on it or something like that. Again, the person who brought this back never spoke about why they got it, where they got it, or anything to their family members that still survive today. But flipping it over, it has what I believe to be potentially a hemp liner in there, some sort of faux leather, plastic, uncomfortable edge, and we have tabs for where you would have a chin strap, which does not exist. And as you would notice on the inside, we have writing. We also have writing on the back, a number 7. This kanji right here, now of course, I'm not an expert in reading kanji, but I believe it means electrical or electricity. So maybe this helmet could originally belong to a line worker, something like that. I know that one of these symbols means air and the other means electric or power. And together they mean electricity. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody's out there. This video is not just for me to show this off and try to educate people myself. I'm also seeking information. So if you know anything about the Japanese Civilian Defense Forces or the Keibodan or this kanji, please let me know, because it's very hard to find information on these forces. They're kind of a forgotten military unit because everyone is so much more interested in the actual Japanese Army and Navy forces that fought on the islands rather than the civilians, which, as we know in warfare, the civilians always suffer the most. So, as I was saying, the symbol that stands for electric in this kanji existed before electricity existed. And I'm having trouble figuring out what it meant pre-electricity. And so I'm thinking maybe if this doesn't mean designate a line worker or some sort of electrical worker, maybe it is just some sort of military unit designation that is lost to time. And why it has a 7 on it, I don't know, maybe that was the soldier's number. I have absolutely no clue, but it is a very cool, neat piece of history. I admire it a lot, and it is a pretty cool beginner collector item when it comes to Japanese militaria collectibles, because they tend to be quite expensive. So I wish I had more information for you on these military forces. And the only other thing I could tell you is that the Keibodan, they recruited through schools too in the Dutch East Indies. They broke down their schools into actually military units, grade levels down to classes, much like how a military unit would do, from squads to platoons and so on and so forth. They did so with the classes in those islands, and they were actually recruiting partially for the Keibodan, Japanese Navy, and also for, I hate to put it this way, guys, self-deletion troops. Yeah, YouTube, I know. But that was what many of these schools served as in the Dutch East Indies, in which the Keibodan would be policing the civilian populace. So I hope that was informative to you guys. I hope you liked the video. And oh, if I forgot to mention, I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier, there were some civilian defense forces in fighting roles. I spoke to what I see as a master Japanese collector, and he had no information on the civilian defense forces, but he could tell me that he knew that some were stationed in Iwo Jima. So is there a greater than 0% chance that this helmet came from Iwo Jima? Yes. Do I think it did? Hell no. All right, guys, I guess I'm going to end this video once again by asking if anybody knows anything about the Japanese Civilian Defense Force, the Keibodan, or anything in that line of Japanese World War II history. Please leave it in the comments. I scoured Google and the search engines as much as I could, and YouTube, and there is next to no information on these guys, which really surprised me. I was able to find some cool photos, which I put up on the screen for you, but that's about it. So you guys enjoy your week, and I will be seeing you guys soon.